A boy's stray kick unveils a chilling secret. In a forbidden barn, a terrified girl hides from a deadly pursuer. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to catch our latest videos. Don't miss the shocking truth. The ball exploded off Ethan's foot, a wild kick that sent it screaming through the storm-charged air, only to crash against the forbidden barn with a bone-rattling crack. The 12-year-old skidded to a halt, dirt spraying beneath his sneakers, his chest heaving as the echo faded into the twilight. The barn squatted at the farm's edge, its splintered planks blackened by years of neglect, the chained door a grim sentinel under a sky boiling with thunderclouds. His father's warning clawed at his mind. "Touch that barn, Ethan, and you'll wish you hadn't." But the ball his only escape from the endless chausoirs inside, and the thought of losing it burned hotter than fear. He glanced at the farmhouse, its windows shuttered tight, his father still out checking the fences. No one would see. Heart hammering, Ethan sprinted to the barn, the wind whipping his hair, carrying the metallic tang of rain and something fouler, like rot. The chain was loose, the padlock rusted to a husk, and with a desperate yank, it snapped free. The door groaned open, swallowing him into a darkness thick with dust and mildew. His eyes strained against the gloom, catching glints of broken tools and stacked crates, the air heavy with a stench that made his stomach lurch. There, half buried in straw, was his ball, its red leather scuffed but whole. He lunged for it, but a sharp rustle froze him mid-step, like a predator stirring in the shadows. Ethan's pulse thundered as he scanned the barn, his breath shallow. A shape moved in the corner, small and hunched. He squinted, fear coiling in his gut, and saw Hera girl, his age, curled on a bed of straw, her bare feet caked with mud, her clothes shredded and stained. Her face was hidden by matted hair, but her hands twitched, clutching a rusted nail as if it were a lifeline. Was she alive? Ethan's mouth went dry, his instincts screaming to run, but pity rooted him in place. He stepped closer, the floorboards shrieking under his weight, and her eyes flew open wild, bloodshot, pinning him like a cornered animal. Before he could react, she sprang up, silent as a ghost, and tackled him to the ground, her hand clamping over his mouth, the nail pressed against his throat. "Don't scream," she hissed, her voice a ragged whisper, her breath hot against his cheek. "Don't tell anyone I'm here, or we're both dead." Ethan's heart jackhammered, his body rigid under her weight, her trembling fingers betraying her own terror. Up close, he saw the cuts on her knuckles, the purple bruises blooming across her arms, and the haunted look in her eyes, like she'd seen hell itself. "He's coming for me," she said, her gaze flicking to the door, her voice barely a breath. "He always finds me." Ethan's mind reeled. Who was she? Why was she in his father's barn? The questions choked him, but a sudden crash outside shattered the silence. A metal clang, like a gate slamming shut. The girl's nails dug into his skin, her body tensing like a coiled spring. "He's here," she whispered, dragging Ethan behind a crate, her movements swift and practiced. His knees scraped the floor as they crouched, the straw prickling his skin, the ball forgotten. Heavy footsteps crunched closer, deliberate, predatory, each one a hammer blow to Ethan's nerves. The barn door shuddered, chains rattling, and a low, guttural laugh slithered through the cracks, chilling Ethan to the bone. "You can't hide forever, little bird," a man's voice rasped, thick with menace. Ethan's blood froze. Was it his father? No, it couldn't be, but the doubt gnawed at him, sharp and cruel. The girl's hand tightened on the nail, her eyes locked on the door as it began to creak open, a sliver of dying light spilling inside. Ethan's gaze darted to the glint of something in the man's hand-hooked blade, its edge catching the storm's flicker. But then, a sharper sound cut through the ira, dogs' frantic barking, distant but growing louder, followed by a shout from the farmhouse. The footsteps hesitated, the blade vanishing as the man cursed under his breath. "This ain't over," he snarled, and the door slammed shut, the footsteps retreating fast. Ethan exhaled, his body shaking, but the girl didn't move, her eyes still fixed on the door, as if expecting the man to burst back in. "Who was that?" Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. She turned to him, her face pale, her lips trembling. "Someone your father knows," she said, her words a dagger to his heart. Before he could press her, a new sound erupted, the roar of an engine, tires spinning on gravel, and the dog's barks fading into the distance. The girl slumped against the crate, her strength spent, but her grip on the nail never loosened. Ethan's mind spun, torn between the girl's words and the life he thought he knew. The barn felt smaller now, its walls closing in, and the truth, whatever it was, waited just beyond that door. Ethan's breath burned in his chest, trapped behind clenched teeth as he crouched in the barn's suffocating dark, the girl's trembling hand still gripping his wrist like a vice. The echo of the stranger's blade and his chilling words "you can't hide" forever lingered, but the engine's roar had faded, leaving only the storm's restless growl and the barn's creaking bones. The air was thick with mildew and something sharper, like blood gone stale, and Ethan's mind spun, snagged on the girl's whispered bombshell. "Someone your father knows." His father, with his stern rules and weathered hands, couldn't be part of this nightmare, could he? The doubt was a blade, twisting deeper with every heartbeat. The girl, her bruised face half hidden by tangled hair, watched him with eyes that held too much fear for a 12-year-old, her rusted nail clutched like a lifeline. "Who are you?" Ethan hissed, his voice barely a scrape against the silence. Her lips parted, but a sudden clatter shattered the moment, metal crashing against wood, deep in the barn's shadows. Ethan's heart lurched, his shoulder slamming into a crate as he stumbled back. The girl yanked him down, her nails biting into his skin, her breath hot against his ear. "Don't move," she whispered, her voice raw with panic. Another crash, closer, like a chain dragged across the floor, and Ethan's pulse thundered, his eyes straining to pierce the gloom. Was the man back? Had he never left? The girl's gaze flicked upward, to the loft's sagging beams, and Ethan followed, catching a faint scuff, like boots scraping wood. Someone was up there, stalking them. Before he could speak, a low whine cut through a familiar sound. Rusty, the farm's hound, nosed through the straw, his ears pricked, but his hackles rose, a growl rumbling as he stared past them, into the dark. Ethan's relief curdled into dread. Rusty only growled at strangers. The girl's grip tightened, her lips moving silently, counting seconds. "He's not alone," she said, her voice a thread, and as if summoned, a sharp crack exploded above a floorboard, snapping under weight. Dust rained down, stinging Ethan's eyes, and he stifled a cough as the girl dragged him toward a stack of burlap sacks, shoving him into a narrow gap between the sacks and the wall. The musty fabric pressed against his chest, straw pricking his knees, but he held still, his breath shallow. Rusty's growl turned to a furious bark, and a heavy thud shook the loft, followed by a curse, low and venomous. "Stupid mutt," a man's voice snarled, not the same as the blade wielder's, but colder, sharper, like a knife honed to kill. Ethan's blood froze. Two of them? The girl's hand found his, clammy and trembling, and she squeezed, a silent command. "Stay put." Footsteps paced above, slow, deliberate, pausing directly overhead. Ethan's heart hammered, each beat a countdown to disaster, and he glimpsed the girl's face pale, resolute, her nail poised like a dagger. A creak sounded, then another, as the man descended the loft's ladder, each step a hammer blow to Ethan's nerves. Rusty's barks grew frantic, and a sudden yelp cut off with a sickening thud, followed by silence. Ethan's stomach twisted Rusty, but the girl's grip stopped him from moving. "He's testing us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He knows I'm here." Ethan's mind reeled. "Who's he? And what's my dad got to do with this?" Her eyes met his, haunted, and for a moment she hesitated. "Your dad, he made a deal," she said, each word a wound. "He didn't know what it cost. I ran when I could, but they never stop." A deal. Ethan's world tilted, his father's late-night arguments with strangers flashing through his mind, the locked drawer in his study, the barn's forbidden door. Before he could press her, a new sound sliced through, a slow, deliberate scrape, like a blade dragged along wood, coming from the barn's far wall. The girl stiffened, her breath hitching. "He's circling," she said, and yanked Ethan deeper into the sacks, her movements swift, practiced, like she'd hidden 100 times before. The scrape grew louder, closer, and a shadow flickered across the crates, tall and angular, moving with predatory grace. Ethan's throat tightened, his body screaming to run, but the girl's eyes held him, fierce and unyielding. "If he finds me, he'll kill us both," she said, and shoved the nail into his hand. "Fight if you have to." The words hit like a punch, but before Ethan could process them, A deafening crash erupted, the barn's side door slamming open, wind howling through, scattering straw and dust. The shadow vanished, but footsteps crunched outside, fast and heavy, circling back toward the main door. Ethan's heart seized as the girl pulled him toward a rusted hatch in the floor, half hidden under straw. "Down," she hissed, prying it open with desperate strength. Ethan hesitated, the nail's weight foreign in his hand, but the footsteps were closing in, and a low laugh echoed, chilling his blood. "Gotcha now, little bird," the man called, his voice dripping with glee. Ethan dropped into the hatch, landing hard on damp earth, the girl tumbling after him, slamming the hatch shut. The crawlspace was tight, reeking of rot, and Ethan's knees scraped stone as they scrambled forward, the nail clutched tight. Above, the barn shook with the man's steps, and a blade stabbed through the hatch, inches from Ethan's head, splintering wood. The girl stifled a gasp, pushing him deeper into the dark, her voice a fierce whisper. "Your dad's not the monster," she said, "but he's why I'm here." Ethan's world cracked, and as the blade struck again, he knew nothing would ever be the same. Ethan's knees scraped raw against the crawlspace's jagged stone, the air choking with damp earth and rot as he scrambled behind the girl, her shadow barely visible in the suffocating dark. The barn above shuddered with the pursuer's rage, wood splintering as the blade stabbed through the hatch again, a grating screech that clawed at Ethan's nerves. The girl's hand, slick with sweat, tugged him forward, her breath ragged but controlled, like she'd fled through worse. Ethan's heart thundered, the nail she'd given him biting into his palm, its weight a grim reminder of her words, "Fight if you have to." Her other words, "Your dad's not the monster, but he's why I'm here," burned hotter, each syllable a crack in the life Ethan thought he knew. The crawlspace narrowed, forcing them to crawl on their bellies, dirt smearing Ethan's face, his lungs screaming for air. Above, the man's footsteps pounded, his low curses mixing with the storm's growl. But they were fainter now, as if he'd moved to the barn's far end. The girl stopped abruptly, her fingers probing the crawlspace's ceiling, a trapdoor, rusted and warped. "Up," she whispered, shoving against it with her shoulder. Ethan joined her, his arms trembling as they pushed, the metal groaning until it gave way, dumping them into a cluttered corner of the barn behind a stack of mouldy crates. Straw dust choked the air, and Ethan coughed, his eyes watering as he scanned the shadows. The barn was silent now, save for the wind rattling the walls, but the absence of footsteps felt like a trap, not a reprieve. The girl crouched low, her eyes scanning the rafters, her nail glinting in the dim light filtering through cracked planks. "He's not gone," she said, her voice barely audible. "He never leaves without checking everywhere." Ethan's stomach twisted, his mind flashing to Rusty's silenced yelp, the dog's fate a weight he couldn't shake. "Who is he?" Ethan demanded, his whisper sharp. "And what's my dad got to do with you?" The girl's gaze flickered, pain and fear warring in her eyes, but before she could answer, a faint clink echoed from the farmhouse glass breaking, followed by a muffled shout. Ethan's blood ran cold. His father was home. The girl grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a pile of tarp-covered equipment, her movements swift and silent. "Your dad can't know I'm here," she said, her voice urgent. "Not yet." Ethan's mind reeled, why not? But the urgency in her eyes silenced his questions. They ducked under the tarp, the fabric heavy with grease and mildew, and Ethan's heart pounded as he heard the farmhouse door slam, followed by his father's heavy boots crunching toward the barn. The girl's hand tightened on the nail, her body tense, ready to bolt. Ethan peered through a tear in the tarp, his breath hitching as his father's silhouette filled the barn's doorway, a lantern swinging in his hand, casting jagged shadows. His father's face was hard, his jaw clenched, but his eyes darted nervously, not like the man who'd taught Ethan to mend fences or whistle for Rusty. "Ethan," his father called, his voice rough, edged with something Ethan couldn't place fear. "Guilt?" The lantern's light swept the barn, grazing the crates, and Ethan shrank back, his pulse racing. The girl's breath was shallow, her eyes fixed on the floor, as if willing herself invisible. His father stepped inside, his boots scuffing the dirt, and paused, his head tilting as if listening. Ethan's chest tightened had he heard them. But then his father muttered something under his breath, too low to catch, and turned toward a rusted toolbox bolted to the wall, one Ethan had never seen opened. With a glance over his shoulder, his father pulled a key from his pocket, unlocked the box, and swung it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Ethan's breath caught as his father reached inside, pulling out a small leather-bound notebook and a folded cloth that clinked softly, like metal on metal. The girl stiffened beside him, her nails digging into Ethan's arm, and he glimpsed her face pale, her lips trembling, as if she recognized something. His father stuffed the notebook into his coat, re-locked the box, and strode out, the lantern's light fading with him. Ethan exhaled, his body shaking, but the girl's grip didn't loosen. "That's his," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "The man chasing me wants what's in that book." Ethan's mind spun. "What's in it?" he asked. But she shook her head, her eyes haunted. Names, places, things your dad wasn't supposed to keep. Before Ethan could press her, a sharp crack split the air outside, branch snapping, too heavy for the wind. The girl's head whipped toward the sound, her body coiling. "He's back," she said, and yanked Ethan toward the toolbox, her fingers fumbling with the lock. "We need to see it now." Ethan hesitated, his father's strange behavior clawing at him, but the girl's urgency was infectious. He grabbed a loose crowbar from the floor, his hands trembling as he wedged it into the box's seam, prying until the lock snapped with a sickening crunch. The compartment swung open, revealing a tangle of papers, a rusted key, and a photograph yellowed, creased, showing a younger version of his father standing beside a man with cold eyes and a hooked scar across his cheek. The girl gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's him," she said, her voice breaking. "The one who won't stop." Ethan's heart stopped as he stared at the photo, his father's arm around the man's shoulder, both smiling like old friends. A low laugh echoed outside, close too close, and the barn door rattled, a blade's edge glinting through the gap. The girl shoved the photo into Ethan's hand, her eyes wild. "Run," she said, but the door was already swinging open. The barn door groaned wide, a gust of storm-charged air blasting through, scattering straw and dust as the scarred man's shadow loomed, his hooked blade catching the flicker of distant lightning. Ethan's heart seized, the photographer's father smiling beside this monster burning in his hand, its edges crumpling under his grip. The girl's eyes, wide with terror, locked onto the man, her body rigid, the rusted nail trembling in her fist. "Run," she'd said, but there was nowhere to go, the barn's walls a trap closing in. Ethan's mind raced, the crowbar still heavy in his other hand, its cold steel, his only defense. Before he could move, a sharp shout cut through the dark. "Hey!" Not the scarred man's voice, but another, rough and unfamiliar, coming from outside. The man froze, his blade lowering, his head snapping toward the sound. Ethan glimpsed a second figure beyond the door, a broad silhouette against the storm's glow, holding a flashlight that swept the yard. "Who's there?" The new voice barked, and the scarred man cursed under his breath, his eyes darting between the barn's interior and the approaching light. The girl seized Ethan's arm, yanking him back behind the crates, her movement swift and silent, the photograph slipping to the floor. They crouched low, Ethan's pulse hammering, his breath shallow as the scarred man hesitated, then bolted out the side door, his footsteps swallowed by the wind. The flashlight's beam swept into the barn, grazing the crates, and Ethan's stomach lurched as heavy boots crunched closer. "Anyone in here?" the new man called, his voice gruff but less menacing, like someone used to giving orders. Ethan's mind spun. Was this another pursuer, or a chance to get help? The girl's nails dug into his wrist, her shake of the head fierce, her eyes pleading, "Don't." Ethan bit his lip, the crowbar slick with sweat as the man lingered, his light dancing across the toolbox's broken lock. A low grunt followed, then the boots retreated, the barn door creaking shut. Silence fell, heavy and tense, broken only by the girl's ragged breathing. Ethan exhaled, his body shaking, but the girl's grip didn't loosen. "Who was that?" he whispered, his voice cracking. She didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the floor where the photograph lay, its image a ghost in the dim light. "We can't stay here," she said finally, her voice low, urgent. "Your dad's back, and that guy someone from town maybe won't keep him away for long." Ethan's chest tightened, his father's nervous glance at the toolbox flashing through his mind, the notebook he'd taken, the deal she'd mentioned. "Tell me what's going on," he said, his whisper sharp. "Why's that man after you? What's my dad hiding?" The girl's gaze met his, her face pale, her lips trembling, and for the first time she looked small, not the fierce survivor who'd tackled him. "My name's Lila," she said, her voice barely audible. "I wasn't supposed to live." Ethan's breath caught, the words hitting like a punch. She sank against the crate, her nail clattering to the floor, and her story spilled out in halting whispers, each word heavier than the last. Lila had grown up in a trailer on the edge of town, her mother gone, her stepfather a man with cold eyes and a temper that left bruises. 2 years ago, he'd started working with someone with a scar, someone who paid for secrets, who moved things through the county no one talked about. "Your dad was part of it," she said, her eyes avoiding his. Not the worst, but he knew. He let them use the barn, looked the other way. Ethan's world tilted, his father's late-night drives, the locked drawer, the barn's padlock all snapping into place. Lila's voice broke as she continued. Her stepfather had tried to sell her to the scarred man, a deal gone wrong when she'd overheard their plans and run, hiding in alleys, forests, until she'd stumbled into the barn, the only place she thought safe. "They want me gone because I know too much," she said, her hands shaking. Names, places, what they've done. Ethan's throat tightened, the photograph's image searing his mind, his father's smile a betrayal. Before he could speak, a low rumble shook the iron engine, not the scarred man's truck, but something heavier, grinding up the farm's drive. Lila's head snapped up, her eyes wild. "That's not your dad," she said, scrambling to her feet. Ethan peered through a crack in the barn's wall, his heart sinking as a black van pulled into the yard, its headlights cutting through the rain. A man stepped out, tall in a slicker, his face hidden, but his posture screamed authority. The farmhouse door opened, Ethan's father stepping onto the porch, his lantern raised, his voice tense as he greeted the man. "Trouble?" the stranger asked, his tone clipped. Ethan's father shook his head, too quickly, and Ethan's gut twisted. His father was lying. Lila grabbed Ethan's arm, her voice urgent. "He's one of them checks the deals. If he searches the barn, I'm dead." Ethan's mind raced, the crowbar heavy in his hand. Lila's story a weight he couldn't shake. He could call out, expose her, trust his father to explain, but the photograph, the notebook, the deal stopped him. "Come on," he said, his voice steady despite the fear. He pulled Lila toward the crawlspace hatch, but she hesitated, her eyes searching his. "Why help me?" she asked, her voice small. Ethan swallowed, the answer clear. "Because I need the truth." They dropped into the crawlspace, the hatch slamming shut as the van's driver crunched toward the barn, his flashlight's beam slicing through the dark, and Ethan knew the choice he'd made would change everything. The crawlspace's dank air choked Ethan's lungs, each breath a struggle as he crawled behind Lila, the rusted nail in his hand slick with sweat, its sharp point a fragile shield against the terror closing in. The barn above trembled with the van driver's heavy steps, his flashlight's beam slicing through the hatch's seams, casting jagged slivers of light across the dirt-streaked walls. Lila's movements were swift, her elbows scraping stone as she led the way, her whispered warning, "He checks everything," echoing in Ethan's mind. His heart pounded, Lila's story searing his thoughts, her stepfather's betrayal, the scarred man's pursuit, and his father's role, not as a monster, but as a man who'd let monsters use his barn. The photograph of his father with the scarred man burned in Ethan's memory, a betrayal that made every creak above feel like a judgment. The crawlspace twisted left, narrowing until Ethan's shoulders brushed both walls, his knees raw from the jagged floor. Lila stopped, her fingers probing a loose board overhead, her breath ragged but controlled. "This leads outside," she whispered, shoving against the wood. Ethan joined her, his arms straining as they pushed, the board giving way with a muffled crack, revealing a sliver of stormy sky and the farm's muddy yard. Rain pelted their faces as they scrambled out, landing in a ditch behind the barn, the van's headlights glaring in the distance, pinning Ethan's father against the farmhouse porch. The driver's voice, sharp and commanding, carried over the wind. "You're sure it's secure?" Ethan's father nodded, his voice tight, but his eyes flicked toward the barn, and Ethan's gut twisted. His father knew something was wrong. Lila grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him toward a row of cornstalks, their leaves slashing at his skin as they ran, the nail clutched tight. "He'll check the barn," Lila hissed, her voice barely audible over the storm. "If he finds the broken toolbox, he'll know we were there." Ethan's mind raced, the notebook his father had taken, the photograph, Lila's words about names and places all colliding. They ducked into the corn, the stalks closing around them like a cage. But the van's engine roared to life, its headlights sweeping the field. Ethan's breath caught had they been seen. Lila shoved him down, her body pressed against his in the mud, her eyes wide with fear. "He's not the scarred man," she whispered, "but he's just as bad. He cleans up their messes." Ethan's blood ran cold, the implication clear. This man wouldn't hesitate to kill. The van lurched forward, its tires chewing gravel, and Ethan glimpsed the driver through the stalk stall, his slicker gleaming, a pistol glinting at his hip. The headlights swung closer, and Lila's hand tightened on Ethan's, her voice urgent. "We have to move now." They bolted, weaving through the corn, mud sucking at Ethan's sneakers, the nail's weight foreign in his hand. The van's engine grew louder, its lights cutting through the stalks, and Ethan's heart hammered as he realized it was circling the field, hunting them. A sharp crack split the Ira gunshot, the bullet ripping through the corn inches from Ethan's head. Lila stifled a cry, yanking him sideways, and they tumbled into a shallow gully, thorns tearing at their clothes. Ethan's ears rang, his body shaking, but Lila's eyes were fierce, her voice steady. "He's trying to flush us out," she said, crawling along the gully's edge. "We need to get to the old millets, the only place he won't look." Ethan nodded, his mind reeling, but one question burned through the fear. "What's my dad really doing with these people?" Lila hesitated, her face pale in the storm's flicker, and her answer hit like a blow. "Your dad was supposed to watch me," she said, her voice breaking. "Not help me escape. He took their money, Ethan, but when I ran, he didn't tell them. He's been lying to both sides." Ethan's world cracked, his father's nervous glances, the locked drawer, the notebook all snapping into place. Not innocence, but a double game. The van's headlights swept the gully, and Lila shoved Ethan against the bank, mud smearing his face as the beam passed inches above them. The engine idled, the driver's boots crunching nearby, his voice low, almost amused. "Come out, kids. Make this easy." Ethan's grip on the nail tightened, his body screaming to fight, but Lila's hand stopped him, her shake of the head firm. The boots moved off, the van rolling forward, but Ethan knew they weren't safe. They scrambled along the gully, the mill's ruined silhouette looming in the distance, its broken walls a faint hope. Rain stung Ethan's eyes, his legs burning, but Lila's words echoed, each one a wound, lying to both sides. His father wasn't a bystander, he was complicit, and Ethan's choice to help Lila had made him a target. A sudden shout from the Barney's father's voice, frantic cut through the storm. "They're not here," he yelled, and the driver's reply was cold. "Then you'd better find them, or you're done." Ethan's heart sank, his father's fear confirming the truth. He was in too deep, and Lila was the key to everything. The mill was close now, its rusted gate ajar, but the van's headlights swung back, pinning them in a blinding glare. Lila grabbed Ethan's hand, her voice fierce. "Run!" They sprinted, the gate's metal screeching as they dove inside, the driver's boots pounding behind, and Ethan knew the chase was far from over. Ethan's shoulder slammed against the mill's rusted gate, the screech of metal drowned by the storm's roar as he and Lila stumbled into the crumbling structure, their sneakers slipping on moss-slick stones. The van's headlights blazed through the gate, casting jagged shadows across the mill's gutted interior, broken machinery looming like skeletal beasts in the dark. Ethan's chest heaved, the nail in his hand slick with rain and sweat, its feeble point no match for the driver's pistol or the scarred man's blade. Lila's hand, clammy but firm, yanked him behind a shattered conveyor belt, her eyes scanning the rafters, her breath sharp and controlled, despite the fear etched into her face. The driver's boots crunched outside, deliberate, unhurried, his flashlight's beam slicing through gaps in the mill's walls, hunting for movement. Ethan's heart pounded. Lila's revelation, his father's double dealing, paid to guard her, yet hiding her escape twisting like a knife. The mill's air was thick with mold and rust, the storm's howl barely masking the driver's low whistle, a taunting sound that made Ethan's skin crawl. "No use hiding, kids," the man called, his voice smooth, almost amused, as his boots crossed the threshold, the gate clanging shut behind him. Ethan's stomach lurched, the photograph of his father with the scarred man flashing through his mind, a truth he couldn't unsee. Lila crouched lower, her lips brushing Ethan's ear. "He's baiting us," she whispered, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "We need something to use against them. Something in here." Ethan's eyes darted around, catching glints of scattered debris, rusted gears, broken planks, a coil of frayed rope. The mill had been abandoned for years, a relic of the farm's better days. But Lila's urgency sparked a memory his father's stories of hiding places, old smuggling routes from decades past. "There's a storage room," Ethan whispered, nodding toward a shadowed corner where a warped door hung ajar. "Dad said they used to stash stuff there." Lila's eyes flickered with hope, but the driver's flashlight swept closer, its beam grazing the conveyor belt, forcing them to duck, their faces pressed into the cold stone. The man's boot stopped, his whistle cutting off, and Ethan's pulse spiked as a soft clink echoed like metal tapping metal, testing for hollow spots. "Smart kids," the driver muttered, his voice closer now, just beyond the belt. Ethan's grip on the nail tightened, his body screaming to run, but Lila's hand steadied him, her nod fierce. "Wait." The beam moved off, the boots crunching toward the mill's far end, and Lila seized the moment, pulling Ethan toward the storage door, their movements silent but frantic. The door creaked as they slipped inside, the air heavier, reeking of oil and decay, shelves sagging with forgotten tools and crates. Lila's hands flew across the shelves, searching while Ethan wedged a broken plank against the door, his arms shaking. "What are we looking for?" he hissed, his voice low. Lila's eyes met his, haunted but determined. "Proof," she said. "Your dad kept records, things he wasn't supposed to. If we find them, we can stop them." Ethan's throat tightened, the notebook his father had taken from the toolbox flashing through his mind, Lila's words about names and places ringing true. A rusted filing cabinet stood in the corner, its drawers warped but intact, and Ethan joined Lila, prying at the top drawer with the nail, the metal screeching as it gave way. Inside were papers, yellowed and brittle, but among them, a small ledger caught Ethan's eye, handwritten, its pages filled with dates, locations, and coded initials. Lila's breath hitched as she scanned it, her finger tracing a line. "This is it," she whispered. "Deliveries, payments, my stepfather's name, the scarred man's too." Ethan's heart sank, his father's initials glaring from the page, proof of his complicity. Before he could speak, a sharp crash shook the door, the plank splintering as the driver's boot slammed against it. "Found you," the man growled, his flashlight blinding as it pierced the gap. Ethan's blood froze, but Lila shoved the ledger into his jacket, her voice fierce. "Keep it safe." She grabbed a wrench from the shelf, tossing it to Ethan, and together they scrambled toward a narrow chute in the wall, once used for grain, now their only escape. The door buckled, the driver's pistol glinting as he forced his way in, and Ethan dove into the chute, Lila behind him, the ledger pressed against his chest. They slid, the metal scraping their skin, landing in a pile of rotted sacks outside the mill, rain lashing their faces. The driver's shout echoed above, his boots pounding as he realized they'd slipped through. Ethan clutched the ledger, its weight a ticking bomb, but Lila was already moving, pulling him toward a drainage ditch, the van's headlights still sweeping the field. "They'll kill for this," she said, her voice raw. "Your dad included." Ethan's world spun, loyalty and betrayal colliding, but a sudden flare of light stopped them cold. The scarred man's truck, roaring up the drive, its grille gleaming like a predator's teeth. The driver's voice rang out, calling to the scarred man, and Ethan realized they were surrounded, the ledger their only weapon, and the ditch their last hope as the truck's headlights pinned them in place. Ethan's chest burned, his body pressed into the muddy ditch, the ledger's sharp edges digging into his ribs as the scarred man's truck loomed, its headlights carving through the rain like twin blades. Lila's hand gripped his, her nails drawing blood, her eyes wide with the same terror Ethan felt clawing at his insides. The van's engine growled nearby, its driver shouting to the scarred man, their voices a sinister chorus over the storm's howl. The ledger proof of deals, names, and his father's complicity was a death sentence clutched in Ethan's hands, its weight pulling him toward a truth he wasn't ready to face. Lila's whisper, barely audible, cut through his panic. "We can't outrun them." Ethan's heart sank, the ditch's shallow cover no match for the men's weapons, their relentless hunt. The scarred man's truck lurched closer, tires chewing mud, and Ethan glimpsed his silhouette angular, the hooked scar glinting as he leaned out, a rifle resting on his arm. The driver's flashlight swept the ditch, its beam grazing Ethan's sneaker, and Lila yanked him deeper, thorns tearing at their skin. Ethan's mind raced, the photograph of his father with this monster, the ledger's coded initials, Lila's story of betrayal all colliding. His father had lied, played both sides, but was he a villain or a man trapped? The question choked Ethan, but Lila's voice, fierce despite her fear, snapped him back. "The ledger's our only shot," she said, her breath hot against his ear. "Get it to someone who can stop them." Ethan nodded, the nail still in his hand, its rusted point a grim promise. A sudden shout from the farmhouse, his father's voice raw and desperate, shattered the tension. "Stop! They're just kids!" Ethan's blood froze, his father's figure staggering into the yard, lantern swinging, his face pale in the truck's glare. The scarred man laughed, a guttural sound that made Ethan's skin crawl, and swung his rifle toward the porch. "You had one job, Tom," he snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. "Keep the girl quiet. Now you're begging?" Ethan's world tilted, his father's name Toman, the ledger, the deal Lila described, all confirmed in that moment. The driver stepped forward, his pistol raised, his voice cold. "Hand them over, or you're done." Ethan's father shook his head, his hands raised, his voice cracking. "I didn't sign up for this," he said, and Ethan's heart twisted fear, guilt, or something else in his father's eyes. Lila's grip tightened, her whisper urgent. "He's buying time. Move." Ethan hesitated, loyalty warring with the truth, but the ledger's weight and Lila's fierce gaze pushed him forward. They crawled along the ditch, mud sucking at their knees, the truck's headlights flickering as the scarred man shouted, his rifle trained on Ethan's father. A gunshot cracked, the bullet slamming into the porch, splintering wood, and Ethan stifled a cry as his father dove behind a barrel, still shouting, "Run, Ethan!" The words hit like a punch, proof his father knew he was near, proof he was trying to protect him or cover his own sins. Lila pulled Ethan toward a rusted tractor at the ditch's end, its bulk a fleeting shield. They scrambled behind it, Ethan's hands shaking as he tucked the ledger deeper into his jacket, the nail clutched tight. The scarred man's truck revved, circling the yard, while the driver advanced on the farmhouse, his pistol glinting. Ethan's father emerged, hands still raised, his voice steady now. "Take me," he said. "Leave the kids." The scarred man's laugh was a blade, his rifle swinging toward the ditch, as if sensing their movement. Ethan's breath caught his father was baiting them, risking everything. But why? Lila's eyes met Ethan's, her voice low. "He's not who you think. He tried to fix it, but it's too late." Ethan's throat tightened, the ledger's pages flashing through his mind, his father's initials, dates, payments. "Fix what?" he hissed. But a sharp crack cut her off the driver's flashlight, smashing against the tractor, its beam pinning them. "Gotcha," the driver growled, his pistol rising, but Lila was faster, hurling a rock from the ditch, striking his wrist. The gun fired, the bullet grazing Ethan's arm, hot pain searing his skin, and he stumbled, the nail falling into the mud. Lila yanked him up, her strength defying her size, and they sprinted toward the barn, the only cover left. The scarred man's truck roared after them, its grill a snarling beast, and Ethan's father's shout rang out, "No!" The barn door loomed, half open, and Ethan dove inside, Lila behind him, the ledger slipping but still secure. The truck skidded to a stop, the scarred man leaping out, his rifle raised, but Ethan's father tackled him, both men crashing to the ground. The driver recovered, his boots pounding closer, and Ethan's eyes darted to the toolbox, its broken lock a faint hope. Lila grabbed a crowbar, her voice fierce. "The ledger's enough to end this. Get it out of here." Ethan's heart tore. His father was fighting, maybe dying for them, but the ledger proved his guilt. Run or stay. The driver's silhouette filled the door, his pistol gleaming, and Ethan's choice loomed. The ledger a burning weight, his father's sacrifice, a question he couldn't answer as the rifle's crack echoed again. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs, the barn's stale air choking him as he crouched beside Lila, the ledger's weight a burning anchor in his jacket, its pages a map of betrayal that could save or damn them all. The driver's silhouette filled the barn door, his pistol glinting in the storm's flicker, his boots crunching with predatory calm. While outside, Ethan's father grappled with the scarred man, their grunts and the rifle's clatter a desperate symphony. Lila's crowbar trembled in her hands, her eyes fierce despite the blood trickling from a cut on her cheek, her whisper sharp. "You have to gono." Ethan's mind reeled. The ledger's truth, his father's initials, the deals, Lila's captivity clashing with the image of his father fighting, maybe dying, to give them time. The driver's flashlight swept the barn, its beam grazing the toolbox's broken lock, and his low chuckle sent ice down Ethan's spine. "No more running, kids," he said, his pistol rising, but Lila was already moving, hurling a rusted can from the floor, the clang echoing as it struck the crates. The driver swore, his shot going wild, splintering wood above Ethan's head, and Lila shoved Ethan toward the crawlspace hatch, her voice urgent. "Take the ledger to town, find Sheriff Carter." Ethan's throat tightened. Sheriff Carter's name a faint hope, the man who'd once patched his bike tire, who'd listen. But his father's shout-roar, pained cut through the storm. "Ethan, go!" The words were a blade, proof his father knew the cost, proof he'd chosen this fight. Ethan's eyes met Lila's, her nod fierce, and he dove for the hatch, the ledger secure, but the driver's boots pounded closer, his flashlight pinning Lila as she swung the crowbar, striking his arm with a sickening crack. The pistol skidded across the floor, and Ethan hesitated, loyalty tearing at him. But Lila's scream, "Run!" pushed him into the crawlspace, the hatch slamming shut as the driver's roar shook the barn. Ethan crawled, mud and stone scraping his skin, the ledger a lifeline he couldn't lose, his father's sacrifice a fire in his chest. Above, the barn erupted in chaos. Lila's shouts, the driver's curses, and a new sound, sirens, distant but growing louder, slicing through the storm. Ethan's heart leaped. Someone had called for help. Maybe the stranger from town who'd interrupted earlier. He pushed through the crawlspace, emerging in the ditch, rain lashing his face as red and blue lights flashed in the distance. Sheriff Carter's cruiser speeding up the drive. The scarred man's truck revved, its headlights swinging toward the road, but Ethan's father lay in the mud, blood seeping from his shoulder, the scarred man looming over him, rifle raised. Ethan's breath caught, the ledger heavy, but he sprinted toward the cruiser, waving frantically, the nail still clutched in his hand. "Sheriff!" he shouted, his voice raw, and Carter's deputy slammed the brakes, leaping out, weapon drawn. The scarred man froze, his rifle lowering as the deputy barked, "Drop it!" Ethan thrust the ledger at Carter, his words tumbling out, "It's proof names, deals, they're after Lila." Carter's eyes narrowed, scanning the pages, his face hardening as he recognized the scarred man's initials. The deputy advanced, cuffs glinting, and the scarred man bolted, diving into the truck. But Carter's shot punctured a tire, the vehicle swerving into a fence with a deafening crash. Ethan turned back to the barn, his legs burning as he ran, the driver's shouts silenced now. Lila's figure staggering out, crowbar in hand, the driver slumped inside, unconscious. Lila's eyes met Ethan's, relief and exhaustion warring in her gaze, and she nodded, a silent thank you. The deputy hauled the scarred man from the wrecked truck, cuffs snapping shut, while Carter knelt beside Ethan's father, radio crackling for an ambulance. Ethan dropped to his father's side, his hands shaking, blood soaking the mud. "Why?" Ethan choked, the ledger's truth a weight between them. His father's eyes, pained but clear, met his. "I thought I could protect you," he said, his voice weak. "I was wrong. Forgive me." Ethan's throat closed, anger and love colliding, but he gripped his father's hand, the sirens a promise of justice. Days later, the farm was quiet, the barn's secrets laid bare. The ledger exposed a trafficking ring, the scarred man and driver among dozens arrested, Lila's stepfather included. Lila found a home with a foster family, her smile tentative but growing, and Ethan visited, their bond forged in the dark. His father recovered, facing trial but cooperating, his confession a step toward redemption. Ethan stood by the barn, its door open now, the nail in his pocket a reminder of the boy he'd been and the truth he'd fought for, a truth that healed as much as it hurt. A boy's discovery in a forbidden barn unraveled betrayal, leading to justice and healing. Thanks for listening. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell to never miss our latest gripping stories. Stay tuned for more.